All right, guys, sorry for a little bit of the delay. Obviously, we are taking a few minutes to get loaded up here, but we have a very exciting first thing to show you today where Will Smith, he teased this out actually last night. He is talking to astronaut Drew Fustel in space, the International Space Station. The first time an Instagram Live is being done up to the International Space Station, asking him a variety of questions, obviously, about people in space, about astronauts, and anything you can think of. Right now, the video, of course, it is video from ground Earth into space. It is dealing with a little bit of an interruption, so we weren't able to get that loaded up right now for you. But it's a really, really exciting event, so I hope that you will stay on with us once we get that figured out. It is, of course, courtesy of Nat Geo. They're hosting the first ever Instagram Live from the space station, and Will Smith is going to be asking a ton of questions to these experienced astronauts to tell the story of why life exists on Earth as we know it, and sort of what Earth looks like, of course, from space, getting their picture. It looks like it's coming up now. Let's bring you over there.
When you look back, what is the shape of the spaceship called Earth?
It's pretty darn round from my viewpoint, and it's there's no doubt about it. We're going round and round.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was one of those questions I X'd out. I X'd out from my comment. I was like, I refuse to ask that question. So we have about 2 minutes left. So I just really want to say thank you for this. You know, when I was a child growing up, I was one of those kids. Oh, that's the water. That's wow.
I don't have the water, but that's candy coated chocolate inside of a ball spinning.
Wow, that is fantastic.
It's kind of cool. These things all coalesce and start wrapping around the side of the ball here.
Yeah. That is fantastic. Well, so now, Drew, I just want to say
there's a lot of neat stuff to see up here.
No, that is fantastic. Thank you very much for your time. Is there anybody, you have any family members or anybody you want to shout out? Somebody, somebody you want to say hi to? Oh, that's hot.
Luckily, I get to talk to my family just about every day.
Oh,
but I just want to give a shout out to all the people watching and say thanks for tuning in. And it's always a pleasure to talk to folks on the ground. And we hope that people keep joining the adventure here and watching the great stuff, the great research we're doing up on the space station. We appreciate you dialing in to ask us some questions today, Will.
Hey, Drew, I appreciate you, man. Thank you very much for your service. God bless.
Thanks, sir. Take care.
All right now.
All right, guys. Well, that was a little bit slightly short-lived, rather, with Will Smith interviewing Drew Fustel up in space, the International Space Station. It's the first time they've ever done an Instagram Live up to space, so it's kind of cool to see. Of course, Will Smith is actually promoting his new show on the Nat Geo television channel called One Strange Rock. He'll be the host of that, and he'll be talking to astronauts, talking about space, talking about what Earth is like and looks like from space, and all that. So again, courtesy, thank you, Nat Geo, of course, who is under our parent company, 21st Century Fox, for letting us jump into that. But really cool live interview there with Drew, the astronaut. I know we missed a little bit of that, unfortunately, but we will be hopefully having more of these things happen that we can bring to you live. Pretty exciting way to start the show today. But anyway, welcome to Fox 5 Live, guys. April 12th, 2018. We're glad to have you in the newsroom. And we have a lot of political stuff, of course, going on right now. I want to jump over, though, to a local story. Totally local, very hyper-local here in Maryland. Police and officials are investigating and talking about a cold case break. A woman who went missing in the year 2000. Her name was Allison, I have more info, Thresher. and Montgomery County officials in Maryland are going to be announcing their person of interest in this cold case. This is already in progress. Some of the family members seem to be speaking, seem to be there, as well as officials. Let's take a look at what the officials are saying about this cold case break.
Both sexually and emotionally for almost another year, in addition to the nearly 2 years that had already passed since the abuse began. My mother had grown suspicious of him and knew that our relationship was inappropriate, which she made known to both him and others. I strongly denied it when questioned, as this man had carefully groomed me to do. Soon after she made her suspicions known, my mother disappeared. A few months later, when I expressed frustration at his lack of empathy towards my grief over the loss of my mother, Mr. Ostrizaga said to me, "I thought things would be easier for us now that she's gone." At the time, I didn't think anything of it, but after 9 or 10 years of reflection, I started to question if his words meant something more. This man took nearly everything from me: 3 years of my life, my youth, my innocence, my happiness and optimism for the future. But like others who have suffered, I am resilient. For my mother, I need the whole truth to come out. Despite the trial that ensued when I came forward about his abuse and the resulting 100-some years that he was sentenced to spend in prison, there are still many questions that need to be answered. So, if you have any information that may help in the search for justice for Allison Thresher, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem, please contact the police. Just as I did, you may not have noticed it at the time, but now looking back, it might be more meaningful. Thank you.
My name's Sam Thresher. I'm Allison's son. This is Leroy. I can take any questions. Yeah, I can take questions.
How important is it to you that he be punished, not just for what he did to your sister?
Well, it's extremely important, but the sensitivity of the case still at hand is obviously foremost in all of our minds. It's probably, I'd say, the top priority in my life to see that he be persecuted for this crime before he passes. Next question.
Can you tell us a little bit about your mother?
She was an amazing mom. My mom was great. I remember her very well, even though I was only 10 when she passed. She was intelligent. She was eloquent. She was an excellent writer. She was passionate mostly about Hannah and I. And she gave us everything that we hold dear now that, a mother could give. We have creative skills because of her. We have her good looks. We have, all of the things that my mom gave us.
What have you lost?
A mother, which anybody that has a mom, which every human does, should know the importance of a mother and what happens, what could happen, when a mother is taken from a child at that age. I don't know, and I'm still kind of figuring it out, even in my late 20s, what the impact of my mother's disappearance and so now homicide is doing to me, Yeah, next question. We did. Mr. Ostrizaga, that man was, by definition, a sociopath. He was almost a professional at infiltrating groups of people, schools, especially anywhere with a child, and gaining the trust of the people around him. He did this in a professional manner, superb manner, strange. I mean, just there's no way really to describe how well he infiltrated our family and was able to get so close to us with such malintentions. I can't put it into words. I think I'm trying not to cry, and I think if I start doing that, I might cry. So, next question, please.
How long have you had suspicions about this man's death?
Well, honestly, ever since, for me, growing up through it, I was completely, the wool was over my eyes. Once I got into my early 20s, and my sister came forward about Fernando's abuse, Mr. Ostorizaga's abuse on my sister, it took me about a nanosecond to figure out that he was most likely responsible for my mother's. Then it was, as far as I was concerned, it was still a disappearance, and until we have a body, I kind of still feel that way.
How much has it hurt you that you don't have a body?
Immensely. I'd say probably the most difficult part about this entire process is that there has not yet been a body found, and there has not yet been closure. Sometimes, you know, the grass may be greener on the other side, and I think I want that. People get these results and they end up devastated, or that's not the case for Hannah and I. This has been 20 years almost of a question mark, and there's been no funeral, there's been no real closure for Hannah and I. Finding a body would do that, and it would also, it would bring everything together correctly for this case.
Let me just ask you about that. What do you think of a guy who abused your sister and then murdered your mother?
Well, what do I think of him? Well, I don't know if I can say that on camera without being censored, but like I said before, the only way that I've been able to wrap my head around this kind of decision making on his part is that he is a professional sociopath. He's groomed himself to groom little girls, and he did that probably previous to ever working with Hannah and I, or being around Hannah and I, or anything like that. I can guarantee you that he came out like that. It's how it seemed. How I feel about it, he needs to be held accountable for it. That needs to be made public. Needs to be made public about why why he wasn't held accountable previous and things like that. But next question.
In this trial, did you attempt to try and talk to him again?
Yeah, I was actually held, I think, in my statement had to be slated because I screamed something absurd across the courtroom at him. He was he couldn't maintain eye contact until I was on the stand, and then he stared at me the whole time, you know, almost like an intimidation factor. And, you know, yeah.
Have you tried to contact him?
I have not. I would not do that unless it was necessary, which for me right now with the, you know, what's that? That's not going to do anything. Yes, sir.
Yeah, can you talk about just the efforts of the local law enforcement? Can you talk about just the resources that went into kind of uncovering this, and you know, how important it is to keep efforts into working these cold cases, even, you know, so many years after the fact?
Well, there's one of the reasons that the cold case squads are established in police departments around the country is because of the importance, whether it's a sexual assault case, whether it's a homicide case, to take advantage of new technology, take advantage of new information that comes along, and make sure that we continue to follow those leads down. I mean, the reason that we're coming forward today is because we need the public's help in this case. There are people that knew this man. There are people that knew the victim. People that knew the situation with the family, and we're hoping that someone may have some bit of information that will help us with this homicide investigation, and it's tremendously important that we get the word out and let the public know about this.
Does this department not have enough evidence-wise right now to prosecute?
You know, we've got evidence that was recovered from the scene. We have new technology today that did not exist 18 years ago, that processing that evidence again has revealed some additional information for us. But we don't yet, clearly we don't have enough to make charges on anybody, and that's why we're asking for more information from the public. Certainly, we obviously don't have the victim's body either. So all of those things would contribute to our ability to make a charge in this case.
Can you talk about you mentioned destroyed evidence? I know you just said that your technology is different now. but can you expound on that a little bit? And has the person of interest been at all helpful to you in trying to talk to them since the case is reopened?
The person of interest has not been helpful to this point in terms of providing us any information. With regard to the destruction of the evidence, that there was what we believe now, based on the forensic analysis that was done recently, is that there was an attempt by the person who we believe could be responsible for the victim's death, that they, at the time when this occurred, tried to destroy blood evidence and that was at the scene.
Chief, before he was charged here in the county with the sex case, he was living in Montpelier, Vermont. Have you looked back at up in that area to see if he had done anything up there, or they have perhaps had some connection up there that might help you?
I'll let the detectives respond to that.
At the time of the sex abuse charges, we did do several search warrants in that area, and we did release things to the press as well. And we didn't come up with anything in the Vermont area. We did get some things of benefit in his belongings, storage unit, and his home, but there was no other evidence of sex abuse in that area.
Maybe can you talk to us a little bit about what it's meant to work on this case for you and how strongly you feel about bringing justice to this family?
I mean, I think anytime you work cases like that, you get very attached to your victims, and especially when you work cases with kids. And I think the world of Sam and Hannah, and I want to do anything I can to bring closure for them. They're great kids, and, well, not kids anymore, but adults. And I just think the world of them and want to do whatever I can to get closure for them as well as the rest of their family.
Are you the detective that the chief spoke of that wanted to reopen the case?
I am.
And can you tell us your name, please?
Katie Leggett?
L-E-G-G-E-T-T?
Correct.
All right. Thank you all very much.
All right, guys, so I know that is a little bit confusing for some of you who may just be jumping on, but essentially just an update from local officials. Montgomery County Police in Maryland and the daughter and son of the woman who went missing, Allison Thresher, 45-year-old woman at the time from Bethesda, Maryland. She actually worked for the Washington Post. She was a news writer, reporter, producer of some sort, and it was a big case back then. They're still considering it a disappearance, now a homicide. What they did today was name a person of interest, and they had the children here sort of comment on this person and who they knew of him in their lives. And more from the police. Obviously, we jumped in there a little bit after the police officer actually had his statement. But more to come on that as we continue to follow that story. These old cold cases sort of rearing their heads many years later. It's not uncommon that they do so, and we've seen a few of these kind of resurface, and Fox 5 will definitely be following that and getting all the details to see what fleshes out from this investigation. Very interesting case. Meanwhile, guys, on the Hill, former CIA director and now current Trump nominee for Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, he's getting a grilling in the Senate currently, getting questioned, and we have that live coming in, so let's check in there to this. It's all happening right now in front of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Last month, of course, President Trump announced on Twitter that he was firing Rex Tillerson, Secretary of State, so that spot is opening up, and he nominated Pompeo to replace him, so now he's getting the questioning done, and looks like Tim Kaine is questioning right now. Let's check in on Capitol Hill.
Without congressional approval. The president is tweeting that he might do additional military strikes in Syria now, and he's also aiming words directly at Russia. As far as I know, Syria has not declared war against the United States. Has Congress given the president specific authority to wage war against Syria?
Senator, I think you and I actually do share a similar bias for the executive and legislative branches both to be involved when such momentous decisions about war are undertaken. Now that I'm in the executive branch, my views on that have not changed.
And you would agree with me that waging a war requires both a domestic and an international legal justification?
Yes, Senator, I would. with respect, you asked about I don't want to dodge your very specific question. You asked about Syria. For a long time, multiple administrations have found that the president has authority to act and take certain actions without first coming to Congress to seek approval, whether it was Kosovo. The list from Democrats and Republicans is long, and just to close, I share your view. In each case where it is where we America and our soldiers and sailors, airmen and Marines are better off if we have the entirety of the United States government working together and having authorized the activity.
For the past year, I've been trying to secure the administration's detailed legal justification for last April's strikes on the Shayrat military base in Syria. The administration has not fully provided it. And there is reportedly a memo that is laying out a description of what the president or the administration feels are the appropriate executive powers. Would you support the release of the non-classified portion of that memo to Congress so that we can see what the president thinks his powers are and engage in a productive dialogue about that?
So I learned about this memo. I think you shared it with me. I was unaware of that. I promise I'll work alongside you to do the best I can to get you that information. And if it's a classified version of it that you have a right as a member of the legislative branch to see, I'll work to get you that. And if it's an unclassified version, we'll work to achieve that as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Before turning to Senator Young, so then specifically, a surgical strike against, let's just use the last one that occurred with 59 Tomahawk missiles. Do you believe that does require an authorization from Congress?
Senator, multiple administrations have taken those kinds of activities under the president's authority.
Yeah. So I was ranking member when our chairman and I and the committee wrote an authorization for the use of force against Syria that unfortunately was not used and has changed the course of history, unfortunately, and displaced millions of people and hundreds of thousands of people are dead. And not to say that that would have necessarily prevented all of that, but certainly would have changed the trajectory significantly. I agree with you, and I've shared that with the president just in the last very short period of time, that I do not believe that should he choose to take a surgical strike against Syria, that an authorization from us is necessary just based on a body of evidence that we have and the things that have occurred in the past. And I like you, oppose strongly what we did in Libya, and I think that's complicating our efforts in North Korea because of obvious reasons. So with that, Senator Young.
Welcome, Mr. Director, and congratulations on your nomination. My point of emphasis as I start here won't be on trying to identify some areas of principled disagreement. I suspect if we worked hard enough, we might be able to find some of those, but I want to emphasize the importance of having a smart, experienced individual as our next Secretary of State. Based on my time serving with you in the House of Representatives, you've certainly checked those boxes. And we also need a leader who's credible, not just with our own president, but with leaders around the world. And you've also checked that box. So I want to encourage you, and I anticipate supporting you. In our March visit in our office, we spent much of our time talking about crises around the world. You'll certainly be immersed in these should you be confirmed. But we also spent a lot of time talking about communication, the level of responsiveness of the State Department. And I was quite candid with you about my unhappiness from time to time with the Department of State and the level of responsiveness I'd seen over the last year or so. Though it has significantly improved, there's been an uptick in dialogue between the department and my office, and I think this committee more generally in recent months. We have an Article I responsibility, which you understand very well. This is the Committee of Jurisdiction that oversees the State Department. And I just want to get you on record here. You indicated in your prepared statement that you were prepared to pick up our calls on the first ring. I think that's exactly the sort of message that you ought to be sending. So to be clear, do you commit to ensure that the Department of State provides timely and responsive answers to me and my office?
Senator, as a CI director, I adopted the Leon Panetta model, which was more time, more cups of coffee, have have real interactions, whether you agree or disagree with a particular member, to do that and to provide the committee the documents to which they are duly entitled as elected officials. I'll promise to do that for you.
That's refreshing. Thank you. Mr. Director, do you agree that the U.S. national security, our national security depends in large measure on a vibrant and growing economy?
I do.
In your prepared testimony, you mentioned China's systematic policies of stealing our intellectual property, of forced technology transfer, and associated activities. You also mentioned just moments ago that China is using mostly economic tools against us to achieve broader geopolitical, geostrategic ends. Do you believe these policies by Beijing have already undermined, and if they continue unabated, will continue to undermine our ability as a country to realize our potential for economic growth, to incentivize investment in key technologies and key sectors of our economy, and to sustain the financial wherewithal that is required to defend our country and advance our values worldwide?
Yes, Senator, I do. I think those risks are real. I think they're on us today. That is, I think we're in the midst of that. This is not some future risk that's presented to the country. I think we have to confront it today. Most directly on point is the enormous amount of intellectual property that has left the hands, sometimes taken, sometimes coerced out of the hands of U.S. companies. The imagination and creativity of the American workforce has delivered it, and the Chinese have taken it away from us. We have to develop a robust set of tools. CFIA is here, domestic. There's a bunch of tools that we need, and to do that well, such that we can prevent that from continuing to happen in the future.
Well, relatedly, earlier you spoke of the need for, my words, a China strategy. So my sense is you believe we need a whole-of-government, well-coordinated, informed, strategic response to China's coercive, illicit, and deceptive economic and trade practices. Is that correct?
That is correct, Senator Young.
Well, I do too. And that's why I intend to introduce this month some legislation on this very topic. I'm going to require, through this legislation, working with my colleagues and the administration, the periodic production of a national economic security strategy. I'd welcome the opportunity to work with the administration, you in particular, and any colleague who shares these goals. I think we'll get this across the line. It's needed now more than ever. Do you believe that a U.S. response, Mr. Director, to China will be more effective if we assemble a multilateral coalition of allies and key trade partners who also have suffered due to Beijing's economic policies and trade practices, to create a unified international front to apply maximum pressure on Beijing to achieve our objectives, as opposed to a merely bilateral dynamic, which I perceive we have now?
I agree with that. I mean, conceptually, if we can get the countries of Southeast Asia, more broadly in Asia, and others to jointly set up a framework that achieves what it is that you've described as our objective, we are far more likely to achieve most or all of it.
Mr. Director, given the challenges we confront with Russia, Iran, North Korea, China, and beyond, do you believe our nation's need for effective diplomacy will decrease in the coming year or two?
Senator, it seems unimaginable, but if I'm good enough, right? If we can, I am hopeful that we can begin to take some of these challenges away. I was mindful. I had all the former CIA directors nearly all of them attended, and to a person, they'd been there. Some of them 20 and 25 years ago. They said, "Mike, the stack has only gotten longer. We haven't pulled one of these problem sets from the pile, and we need to do that. We need to start to solve some of these."
So your response, though humorous, actually is something I'd like to shine a light on, because the previous occupant of this Secretary of State position once indicated that part of the rationale behind his funding request for the Department of State was that there would be less of a need on account of highly effective near-term diplomacy for as much funding. Now, any large organization here in Washington or beyond can be made more efficient, and we can identify funding decreases that might be made. But I would regard it as a risky strategy to assume that your highly effective diplomacy is going to be a strong rationale for funding cuts. Are you operating under the premise that highly effective diplomacy will lead to lower funding requests in the international account moving forward?
No. When I said that, I am optimistic. I'm hopeful. This is the task to which we're engaged, but I can't see anything in the 6 or 12 or 24-month time horizon that would permit us to have any less demand for diplomatic resources.
Strikes me as responsible. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, former House Energy Committee cohort to the witness, Senator Markey.
Doctor, thank you, along with Senator Gardner and many others, 50, many members. So welcome, sir.
Thank you.
I want to talk about the threat of nuclear war. In North Korea, I'm glad to hear that you believe that we should exhaust all options before resorting to military conflict. I agree with you, but I do not believe that we have yet exhausted all options. You've spoken about setting conditions for success in advance of President Trump's meeting with Kim Jong-un, and I am right now very concerned that the lack of a coherent policy in North Korea could lead to a very poor meeting. And if that meeting goes poorly, some might reach the conclusion that both economic pressure and diplomatic engagement have failed. National Security Advisor John Bolton has recently outlined the case for preventative military strikes on North Korea. Are there any conditions under which you would support preventative military strikes against North Korea as Secretary of State?
Senator, thanks for your question. That phrase, preventive military strikes, has a long history. Lots of folks have different views. I want to be careful. There's a legal view. There's preemption. I want to stay away from the legal. Let me give you my judgment, my diplomatic and national security judgment on that. I want to start with the predicate of your question. While I don't want to speculate or hypothesize on how the negotiation might go, it's my full anticipation that however that meeting goes, there will be enormous diplomatic work yet remaining. To your point, we have not yet exhausted our capacity there. I think there's an awfully long way to go. The president has made clear, and I agree with him, that there may come that day. There may come the day when we see an arsenal of nuclear weapons capable of striking the United States of America. The president has made clear his intention to prevent that from happening. And to the extent that diplomatic tools and other tools that America has as its foreign policy power are unsuccessful, I know that Secretary Mattis has been directed to present to the president a set of options that will achieve the president's objective.
Right. Secretary Mattis has said that we're never out of diplomatic options. And let me get your response to this, because there are going to be some who make that recommendation that we've tried our diplomatic and economic sanctions, and Kim was absolutely unresponsive in this meeting with the president. Let me remind you that the Pentagon has stated that, quote, the only way to locate and destroy with complete certainty all components of North Korea's nuclear weapons programs would be through a ground invasion. And as you know, projections for a conventional war on the peninsula estimate that between 30,000 and 300,000 U.S. personnel could die in the first days of a conflict. You're a military man. You understand this. Is there any circumstance under which you would concur with John Bolton that with the exhaustion of economic sanctions from his perspective, that a ground invasion of North Korea would be necessary in order to rid that country of its nuclear weapons program?
Senator, I suppose I could hypothesize such situations, so I'll answer. Your question is, could I imagine one? Yes, Senator, I could. I mean, I suppose it's possible that we would get to the condition where, and I think there'd be wide consensus on this panel, where Kim Jong-un was directly threatening, and we had information about his activities. Yes, I can imagine times when America would need to take a response that moved past diplomacy.
Yeah. Well, I would say to you that the consequences of the United States initiating an attack against North Korea would be catastrophic.
Senator, I agree with that.
If we had not been attacked, if we had not been attacked, and that's what concerns me about John Bolton. And I think the American people will want reassurances, from you, that you would not consider such an action, because ultimately he already has nuclear weapons, and it would be catastrophic almost immediately if we decided to make a first strike against him. So I don't feel comfortable with you not taking that off the table, but I'd like to move on to Saudi Arabia and the 1, 2, 3 agreement that's being negotiated with them. And again, I'm going to quote Mr. Bolton, that civil nuclear cooperation, or 1, 2, 3 agreements between the U.S. and other countries must include the gold standard, a commitment to forego any uranium enrichment or spent fuel reprocessing to technologies critical to the development of nuclear weapons. Do you believe that any agreement that we negotiate with Saudi Arabia should, in fact, have a gold standard?
Senator, yes. One of my critiques of the arrangement we reached with Iran was it was insufficiently close to such a standard.
So you support the gold standard?
I do.
And
while I've not been part of the negotiation, Senator, I know that the State Department and the Department of Energy are working towards achieving that.
Right. So would you oppose any agreement that was less than the gold standard? That is, that ultimately permitted for uranium enrichment or plutonium reprocessing technology on the soil of Saudi Arabia?
Senator, I can't answer that for you. I can imagine that we got close, but not quite to the full definition of the gold standard. I don't want to hypothesize. But so the answer, I guess, is yes. I can imagine such a scenario.
Well, how do you think Iran would respond if we pulled out of the agreement with Iran while simultaneously agreeing to a deal where Saudi Arabia could receive plutonium reprocessing and uranium enrichment equipment? How do you think they would respond?
Senator, this is precisely my concern with the Iran agreement.
Right. So that's the question I'm asking you. What would be the response of Iran if we were providing nuclear weapons material to the Saudi Arabians?
Yes, Senator, I think they would take it into account. And remember, when we're talking about nuclear weapons, we are most often talking about multiple components. We're talking about fissile material, the capacity to weaponize, and a delivery mechanism, often through missile systems. Today, Iran has the capacity to do.
Right, but
I'm just speaking to the challenge that the Saudi Arabians also see from our failure to negotiate a sound agreement with Iran.
This is going to be a very dangerous concoction. If we pull out of the Iran deal, give nuclear weapons materials to, or permit them to obtain nuclear weapons making materials in their country, the juxtaposition of abandoning the Iran deal while simultaneously giving their arch rival, Saudi Arabia, a sweetheart deal, is going to lead to a highly combustible condition in the Middle East that is avoidable if we reinforce the Iran deal, ensure that it's being complied with, while also maintaining a gold standard. Otherwise, what the Saudi Arabians are going to want is to be put on third base with a lead with nuclear weapons construction materials, and I think this administration will be making a terrible mistake if it negotiates a deal that allows the Saudi Arabians to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Markey.
Thank you for turning to Senator Isaacson. We have talked with Secretary Perry, and I couldn't agree more that we need to stress a gold standard. I will at the same time understand that, I mean, when you have given Iran the right to enrich, everybody in the region is going to want the right to enrich. So you've got your work cut out for you over the next period of time, and it is quite it's very difficult to tell an Arab nation that they cannot when we said that the Shia can. So, Senator Isaacs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations on your nomination. Best of luck to you, and we'll be here to support you in any way that we can. I certainly will. Let me start off by saying thank you to the Department, to the State Department, and to this administration on the Open Skies agreements, which you may or may not be familiar with, but if you aren't, they're essential for the aviation industry and for our country. And this administration and the Bureau of Economic Development of the State Department have done a great job seeing to it that Open Skies is enforced. I hope you'll commit when you get to the State Department, you'll continue that help and enforcement.
I will, Senator Isaacson. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Secondly, I think Ambassador Haley is gone, but let me say this anyway. I'm a big fan of Africa, and I've developed an affinity for Africa since I've been on this Committee of Foreign Relations. I've traveled there extensively, and I think it's the continent of the 21st century in many respects for our country and for everybody else. China's demonstrating they think it's important because they're spending a lot of money and building a lot of buildings and things of that nature. Strategically, with the Straits of Hormuz and many of the locations they have and what's been going on in the Persian Gulf, Africa is tremendously helpful. There are 1.5 million people there, 50 million alone, 150 million alone in Nigeria. Lots of opportunity economically, but it's important that we focus and help them build and develop and grow. Are you familiar with Millennium Challenge Corporation?
Yes, Senator, I'm familiar with it at some level.
Well, I'm a big fan. I think President Bush did a phenomenal job by establishing that program as sort of a partnership economically to help build infrastructure in those countries and have developed governing boards of the Millennium Challenge accounts that held the African countries who received the investment responsible for ending corruption, having better worker laws in their country, and being a partner with the United States to economically develop in their country. So I hope that as Secretary of State, when you have the chance, you'll focus on the Millennium Challenge Corporation and what they're doing, because it's part of that soft power that we have a capability to use to win a lot of friends and influence a lot of enemies. And the reason I use Ambassador Haley as an example, we from time to time need a lot of money, votes in the UN. The more friends we can make in countries in continents like Africa, the more votes we can influence to help us on big issues that we need in the United Nations. So I hope you'll focus on Africa when you have the chance and realize what the State Department has done. Lastly, this is kind of an editorial statement. My experience of the State Department has been that it has been in a blue funk for about 1.5 years. And one of the things, and I told you this when you came to my office, I thought there was a real need for a perk, for an adjustment, and for an attitude improvement in the State Department. I think you afford the opportunity to be that catalyst of the department. To your credit, your critics and your complimenters, or whatever that term should be, at the CIA, give you high marks for bringing that agency back in enthusiasm and motivation and in mission. And I think your meetings with Mike that you referred to in your opening statement and your printed statement were exactly the seed for them, because all of a sudden the employees had a chance to speak out to you, tell you what they thought needed to be done, and you had the chance in that environment to tell them what they could be as a partner with you to help that happen. And as I understand it, and I'm not shilling for anyone, but as I understand it, the attitudes of the State Department are the best that they've probably ever been, that the unity there is strong, and the understanding of the mission of the rank and file employees is great. So I want to challenge you to replicate where possible in the State Department that same energy and fire that you have at the CIA, because the State Department needs it desperately. And the State Department is our hope for peaceful settlements of difficult problems and putting our best foot forward early so we don't have to put our biggest foot forward late. And if you can do that and accomplish what you did at the CIA, at the State Department, you'll be a great secretary. Would you commit to trying to replicate what you've done there already? And please feel free to brag about yourself.
Senator, I will. I'll actually do just the opposite of that. What you described took place because of the talented officers, the expertise, the professionals at the Central Intelligence Agency. That is, I had enormous human capital with which to build a team. And I know the State Department's the same way. I know that the local employees, the civil service, the foreign service officers have that same esprit, that same desire for mission and to be relevant and to be important and to do if you sign up to be a foreign service officer, if you decide to devote your life to that, you have a special commitment. And my task, if I'm confirmed, will be to free them up to go do the great work that they signed up to do when they came aboard at the State Department. I'll work at that every day.
Well, you just demonstrated by giving the credit to the employees of the CIA exactly why you were such a popular director there, and I'm sure will continue at the State Department. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Senator Booker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Pompeo. I do want to just say again, I appreciate you coming by and showing me the respect and deference to give me some time yesterday so we can talk in private.
You're most welcome.
I want to pick up on one of the themes we talked at length about, and that involves many of your past statements concerning Muslim Americans. And perhaps I just want to start with some of your language. In a speech you talked about folks who worshipped other gods and called it multiculturalism. You sort of mourn that we live in a country where that happens. Do you have any views that the Muslim faith or people who believe in worshiping quote unquote other gods, is that just something negative in our country?
No, Senator. You can look at my record. You don't have to take my word for it here today. My record is exquisite with respect to treating people of each and every faith with the dignity they deserve, to protect their right to practice their religion, or no religion for that matter, in the way that they want to. I've done that when I ran Thayer Aerospace and Century International.
And Mr., my time is limited, so if I can follow up.
But it's important because I've heard these critiques, and you raised it yesterday. I've worked closely with Muslim leaders, with Muslim countries. The CIA has saved countless, thousands of Muslim lives during my 15 months. This is at the core of who I am, Senator Booker, and I promise you that I will treat persons of each faith or no faith with the dignity and respect that they deserve.
Your words right now are really encouraging. Words do matter. It's not just actions. In a nation of bigotry, where you see too much bigotry and hatred, you and I both know words matter. So I do understand your actions and I will stipulate to the actions you just said, but I really want to get to the bottom of people who are going to be reading your past statements and give you a chance to further explain them. And I would like to go back to what we talked about, you and I, about this idea, and I'm quoting you, that a special obligation falls on Muslims in regards to terrorist attacks in our country. And you said something very dramatic, and I know you know this. You said that people who are silent are complicit in those terrorist attacks. Do you think that Muslim Americans in this country, who serve in our military, who serve in the State Department, their failure to speak up, are they complicit in terrorist attacks?
Senator, each and every human, not just Americans, each and every human being has an obligation to push back against this extremist use of violence from whatever faith.
So you don't create a special class of people in this country based upon their religion that have a special obligation, as you said, to condemn terrorist attacks?
No, Senator. Having said that, I had a chance to talk about this yesterday. I'm not sure we ended up completely agreeing, but perhaps we did. I also do believe this firmly, that for certain places, for certain forms of violence, there are certain who are better positioned, folks who are more credible, more trustworthy, have a more shared experience. And so when it comes to making sure that we don't have terrorists brewing in places where Muslims congregate, there's a special place, right? They have it's more than a duty, more than a requirement. It's an opportunity, right, to be treated as, when someone from another faith says it can get characterized.
So if I can go on, because I have some more questions. So you think that Muslims in America who are in positions of leadership have a different category of obligation because of their religion? That's what I'm hearing you saying.
I don't see it. It's not an obligation. It's an opportunity.
Okay, so
Senator,
it's interesting because I would agree with you that silence in the face of injustice, we've seen this in the Holocaust, we've seen this in the Civil Rights Movement. I do agree with you that silence in the face of injustice lends strength to that injustice. I do have a problem, though, when you start dicing up American people and saying certain Americans, I don't care if it's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or Muslims that serve on my staff, that they're in positions of leadership that suddenly have a special obligation. I do believe, though, all of us, when this comes to violent actions or even violent words, have an obligation. And so I'm wondering, sir, do you know Frank Gaffney?
yes, I do.
And you've been on his show dozens of times.
I was on his show some, yes, Senator.
I have here over 20 times, and he has talked about Muslims should be, who abide by the adherence of their faith, should be considered, should be tried for acts of sedition and should be prosecuted. Did you remain silent when you were on his show? Did you ever question? Because I have a lot of his statements here. Did you remain silent on the, and he's, from my notes, at least you're a friend of his. Were you silent in your position of authority against these words that are violative of the American Constitution? Were you silent with him?
Senator, my record on this is unambiguous.
Sir,
Senator,
if that's your response, you did not say anything to call out his remarks. What about Bridget Gabriel? Do you know her?
I do.
Someone who runs an organization that has been considered a hate group by the Anti-Defamation League and the Southern Poverty Law Center. Were you silent? Did you ever call her out on her remarks that are hateful or bigoted?
Senator, I've spoken to a number of groups, and I believe my record with respect to tolerance and the equal treatment of people, I think
you never. Yes or no? Did you ever call her out?
Senator, I couldn't tell you. I don't recall each statement I've made over 54 years.
Okay. Well, I believe the special obligation that you talk about for Americans to condemn things that are attacking our Constitution or ideals would obligate you in your own definition to speak out. When it comes to
Senator, if I might, I have called out. We had a terrible fellow in Kansas named Fred Phelps.
Sir, I have a minute left.
I called him out.
I have a minute left because I do want to give you a chance to speak about your comments on gay and lesbians. You said in a speech that mourning an America that endorses perversion and calls it an alternative lifestyle, those are your words, is being gay a perversion?
Senator, when I was a politician, I had a very clear view on whether it was appropriate for two same-sex persons to marry. I stand by that.
So you do not believe it's appropriate for two gay people to marry?
Senator, I continue to hold that view. It's the same view.
And so people in the State Department, I met some in Africa that are married under your leadership. You do not believe that that should be allowed?
Senator, I believe it's the case. We have married gay couples at the CIA. You should know. I treated them with the exact same set of rights.
Do you believe that gay sex is a perversion? Yes or no?
Senator, if I can,
yes or no, sir. Do you believe that gay sex is a perversion? Because that's what you said here in one of your speeches. Yes or no? Do you believe gay sex is a perversion?
Senator, I'm going to give you the same answer I just gave you previously. My respect for every individual, regardless of their sexual orientation, is the same.
So I will conclude by saying,
if I'm confirmed,
I will conclude by saying, sir, you're going to be Secretary of State of the United States at a time that we have an increase in hate speech and hate actions against Jewish Americans, Muslim Americans, Indian Americans. Hate acts are on the increase in our nation. You're going to be representing this country and their values abroad in nations where gay individuals are under untold persecution, untold violence. Your views do matter. You're going to be dealing with Muslim states and on Muslim issues. And I do not necessarily concur that you are put forward the values of our nation when you can't even, when you believe that there are people in our country that are perverse, and where you think that you create different categories of Americans and their obligations when it comes to condemning violence. So I'll have another round, but thank you.
Thank you. Senator Portman. Senator Paul, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for your testimony, and thanks for going through this grueling enterprise and your willingness to serve the country. You discussed with Senator Kaine a little bit about whether or not the president has the authority to bomb Assad's forces or installations in Syria, and you mentioned historically, well, we've done it in the past. I don't think that's a complete enough answer. I mean, my question would be, do you think it's constitutional? Does the president have the constitutional authority to bomb Assad's forces? Does he have the authority, absent congressional action, to bomb Assad's forces or installations?
Senator, as I think I said to Senator Kaine, I'm happy to repeat my view on this. Those decisions are weighty. Every place we can, we should work alongside Congress to get that. But yes, I believe the president has the domestic authority to do that. I don't think that has been disputed by Republicans or Democrats throughout an extended period of time.
Actually, it's disputed mostly by our founding fathers, who believe they gave that authority to Congress, and actually they're uniformly opposed to the executive branch having that power. In fact, Madison wrote very specifically, he said, the executive branch is the branch most prone to war, therefore we have, with studied care, vested that authority in the legislature. So the fact that we have in the past done this doesn't make it constitutional, and I would say that I take objection to the idea that the president can go to war when he wants, where he wants. With regard to Afghanistan, some have argued that it's time to get out of Afghanistan. What do you think?
Senator, I think the course of action that President Trump has taken there is the right one. It is humble in its mission. It understands that We've been there an awfully long time. It has an objective of leaving, but is not prepared to leave until such time as we can put America in a position where we can greatly diminish the threat to our homeland from terrorism that may emanate from there. And with an effort alongside that, which will be required to achieve that first objective, to create, I want to be humble, more stability in Afghanistan.
Well, actually, the president has been very specific at times on this, and he said it is time to get out of Afghanistan. We are building roads and bridges and schools for people that hate us. It is not in our national interest. That's a direct quote. So the president said it was time to get out. It sounds like you say it's time to stay. Is that a difference in opinion? Some here worry that you're going to be too much in agreement with the president. I actually worry you're going to be too much in disagreement.
Hi guys, quickly checking in with you from the newsroom. You're watching Mike Pompeo, the nominee, Trump's nominee for Secretary of State. He's getting grilled here by the Senate. Of course, Rand Paul is here now. Cory Booker, that was a tough one just a few minutes ago, but pretty interesting stuff if you guys are interested in this. Of course, Pompeo, former CIA director, now nominated to be the nation's top diplomat as Secretary of State when the Senate votes him in. So he's going through this round of questioning. Now, really quickly, concurrently, actually, I'm going to show you this video right now. Secretary of Defense, Secretary Jim Mattis, is going through a round of questioning with the House Armed Services Committee to answer questions about the Pentagon's budget this year, the 2018 budget. Both of these hearings were scheduled before the suspected Syrian chemical attack last weekend, but both of these individuals are expected to take questions about that, of course, as it is sort of looming right now with President Trump and what his decision will be on that. He said in the next 24 to 48 hours, and had been tweeting about that as well. So right here, Secretary Mattis likely to get a lot of questions about that, even though this hearing is about the budget. And then back to this one with Mike Pompeo, pretty interesting stuff. Likely to also get some questions on that, as well as just general viewpoints that the senators want to question him on. And again, this is the Senate Foreign Relations Committee asking him questions. So we're watching along with you from the newsroom here. Thanks for joining us on Fox 5 Live. Let's check back in.
And we say, well, we want to leave, but when? We've been there 18 years. I think we should declare victory and come home. I think we won the battle. We did. We literally did win. There's nobody left alive who plotted to attack us on 9/11. I've asked people repeatedly, tell me the names of those left alive in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, anywhere in the world. We're now sending people to war who weren't even born when 9/11 was. And every administration comes, not just Republican, Democrat, they come and say, oh, well, it's just fine. We're going to keep fighting these wars. And it's like that it has something to do with 9/11. No, it has nothing to do with 9/11. Everybody around the world that is a radical Islamist we now are at war with because we said, oh, we got the permission to go at 9/11. But when you were in Congress, you had a little bit different position. Your position with Libya was that we should get authorization. Your position in 2013 was also, you wrote an op-ed with Tom Cotton saying, well, we should give the president the authority he needs to go into Syria. Not because you were like me that we shouldn't get involved in another war, because you were eager to get involved and you wanted to give the president permission and say, please, President Trump, let's go to war in Syria. But I think we need to think these things through, and we need to not be so carte blanche that the Constitution does give just carte blanche, permission for the president to do whatever he wants. Do you think the Iraq War was a mistake?
So I was running a machine shop in Kansas at the time, so I don't have a contemporaneous view that I expressed.
No opinions back then? How about opinions now?
I may well have had an opinion.
But
no, my opinion now is, look, we had bad intelligence. I've been one of the few CIA directors who's been willing to say we get it wrong, in spite of all the enormous resources.
But it's not just bad intelligence.
But we did have bad intelligence.
We did geopolitically the wrong thing. We got rid of the enemy of Iran. We emboldened Iran. We made it worse. We brought chaos to the Middle East. We are still suffering the ramifications and repercussions of the Iraq War. But your president said it very clearly. He says that the Iraq War was the single worst decision ever made. So once again, I'm concerned that you won't be supporting the president, that you will be influencing him in a way that I think his inclinations are actually better than many of his advisors, that the Iraq War was a mistake, that we need to come home from Afghanistan. He was against being involved in Syria at many times in his career. So I think he does have good instincts. And my main concern is that will you be one who will listen to what the president actually wants instead of being someone who advocates for us staying forever in Afghanistan, another Iraq war, bombing Syria without permission? So these are the advice you will give. And I guess that's my biggest concern with your nomination is that I don't think it reflects the millions of people who voted for President Trump who actually voted for him because they thought it'd be different, that it wouldn't be the traditional bipartisan consensus to bomb everywhere and be everywhere around the world. So that's my main concern, and I just want to make sure that that's loud and clear to everyone. That is my concern.
Thank you, Senator Paul.
Thank you, Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director. Good to see you. There's an extraordinary article, I believe, from late last year in the New Yorker that speaks to China's rise coinciding with an American retreat from the globe. And I think we've all seen that as we've traveled the world, that the presence that the United States used to have just simply isn't there, and other countries are taking advantage. This article in part describes a relatively routine meeting of the WTO in which they were negotiating trade rules for agriculture and seafood, something that the United States used to have a big role at. And it quotes someone in attendance as saying, for 2 days of meetings, there were no Americans. And the Chinese were going into every session and chortling about how they were now the guarantors of the trading system. The article makes the case that Trump is China's biggest strategic opportunity. I've seen this, we've all seen this at multilateral meetings that we used to see major U.S. administration presence. There's virtually no presence, and other countries are taking advantage of that. What do you think about the scope of our presence at some of these rule-setting meetings, and what are your plans for the future?
Senator, we need to be there. We need to be active. We need to be capable. We need to be value-added. We need to come prepared to engage and work for America's interest in these multilateral discussions that you're describing for the, I think this was WTO that was in this article. Sounds like we shared that sentiment. I couldn't tell you why we weren't there. I don't know if it was the absence of people or the absence of focus. I view those as important places to get the international rule of law that's in accord with our view and not the Chinese view in that particular instance. You have concerns, and I will do my best to make sure that we're there and we're capable.
Appreciate that answer. I want to get a little bit of a clarification with respect to an answer that you gave Senator Menendez at the outset, coming back to this meeting with the President on March 22nd. Senator Menendez asked you whether there was a discussion about steps you could take to try to frustrate the investigation. And you said that I don't recall what the President asked me that day. Is that your testimony, that you don't recall what he asked?
Yes, and I want to be expressed. I don't recall if he asked anything that particular day. I know the date. I know the meeting to which you're referring, and I don't recall the specifics. And I have answered every question about that meeting and others.
I asked the question because you answered two different ways. You said, I don't recall what he asked me that day, but then you also said he has never asked me to do anything that I consider inappropriate, and those are not consistent.
Those are entirely consistent, Senator. If he asked me to do something appropriate, I'd remember.
Let me give you another chance at a different question. Senator Coons asked you in an earlier round whether you agreed with the President's characterization of the Mueller investigation as an attack on America, an attack on all we stand for. I don't understand why your participation in some of the elements of that investigation would render you unable to tell us that you don't believe the investigation is an attack on America or an attack on all we stand for. I don't think it compromises any of the work that the CIA did or does in that investigation. So I think it's really, I think it'd be really troubling if you couldn't say here today that you don't believe that the Mueller investigation is an attack on America. So I want to give you a second chance at that.
Senator, give me a third chance. These are complex legal issues that special counsel is involved in. I've done my best as CIA director to separate each and every element of that. It is a minefield, Senator Murphy. I want to be on the far side of the line with making sure that I don't create challenges for the special counsel's office, for the two legislative committees that are engaged in this. And so, with all due respect, I just
I think
I'm
by-
trying
I
to
think
stay
by
away with things that relate to the special counsel as where this is about anyway.
By refusing to condemn attacks on the special counsel, I mean, really over-the-line attacks that aren't shared by Republicans here in Congress, you are frustrating the work of the special counsel because you're associating yourself with some very poisonous political attacks.
Senator, I have worked diligently myself, and I have put demands on the team that works for me to go out of our way to make sure we were delivering for each of those 3 investigations. And it is difficult. They've asked for complex information that was classified. We've shared information that goes well beyond what has previously been shared, and we've done so with the aim of ensuring that the special counsel and the Senate Intelligence and House Intelligence Committee have the information they need to conduct their investigations. And you should know we'll do that today and tomorrow. And if I'm confirmed at the State Department, we'll do it there as well.
In the time that I have remaining, I want to come back to the authorization question in Syria. You said you believe that the president has the authority to strike Syrian forces. What is this? What statutory authorization do you draw on to come to that conclusion?
Senator, I believe that the president has that authority. He certainly has it under Article 2 of the Constitution.
What's the limiting factor then with respect to Article 2 powers if he can strike Syrian forces with no existing statutory authorization?
Senator, there are reams of law review articles written in answer to that very question. It's a highly fact-based analysis. There are scores of attorneys strewn throughout the CIA, throughout the State Department, throughout the White House, throughout the Justice Department.
Well, give me one limiting factor.
Yes, Senator, I would, if you make a commitment, right? If you make a commitment that would be traditionally viewed as a classical case for war, then the Constitution so requires. This has been a tussle between the executive and legislative branch for an awfully long time, and you know my views. I think it was Senator Kaine who said that I have, coming from the place that you do and on the congressional side, have deep respect for what it is that you all are looking for.
So normally a limiting factor would be an imminent threat or an attack on the United States. And
right, there's a very definition in the War Powers Act, right? There's a statutory definition that's contained there as well. I can't recite it jot and tittle today, but there's
it's an attack on
it's an
attack. The War Powers refers to an attack on the United States. There's been no attack on the United States from the Syrian regime, correct?
Senator, that's correct.
And there's no imminent threat of attack on the United States from the Syrian regime.
Yeah, Senator, I'm just trying to be very careful. Yes, I think that's correct.
At the end of my time, but I might want to follow up on this. I don't think we're at to the bottom of this question yet. Thank you.
Senator, I'm trying to, you're asking me today to conduct complex legal analysis with legal conclusions. And so I know it's important, and so I'm trying to do my best. I'm at the same time trying to make sure that I don't have some statement I made that I parsed the language.
I understand, but to the extent that there is not an identifiable constraint on Article 2 power, then we are all out of the business of declaring war.
If I could, I'll use another 30 seconds of my time. I think that even on this committee, there's wide disagreement over that. I know Senator Shaheen and myself, I saw our public statements over the last few days, both agree that the president has the ability to make surgical strikes. President Obama carried on for months activities against Libya that I disagreed with on a policy basis, but he had that authority to do so. At least he claimed he did. So look, I think this is a subject of debate, and I think it's prudent of our witness to not try to analyze the very details of that. On our own committee, we would debate that on both sides of the aisle at length. But I thank you for having this conversation. I look forward to the follow-up. Senator Brasso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Pompeo, congratulations on your nomination. Thank you for your service to the nation. Thanks for coming by and visiting with me, taking the time to discuss the critical issues of national security. And I concur completely with you in the presidential authority to use military force in Syria. And I wanted to stay with Syria for a few moments, if I could, because what we've seen, Assad has continued to use chemical weapons, killing thousands, and most recently it sounds like another attack a few days ago. Reports emerged from the regime to killing men, women, children outside of Damascus, another terrible chemical weapons attack. How would you suggest that the U.S. hold Assad and the regime accountable for its use of chemical weapons?
Senator, if I may, I'd prefer not to. This is a live discussion, one that, as the intelligence director, I'm actively a part of. So I'd prefer not to talk about plans and intentions with respect to how it is or whether it is that the United States intends to respond to the most recent use of chemical weapons by the Assad regime.
Moving to a different topic, you and I had a chance to discuss Russia and how it uses energy as a weapon, a geopolitical weapon, and Putin continues to use Russia's natural gas to extort, to threaten, to coerce our allies and our partners overseas. While we have been working to help our allies with energy security and diversification, Russia continues to attempt to expand its near monopoly over European energy supplies with the construction of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. On March 15th, I led a bipartisan group, 39 senators, sending a letter to both Secretary Mnuchin and the Deputy Secretary of State Sullivan, opposing the pipeline. We all agree. We requested the administration utilize all the tools at our disposal to prevent the construction of that pipeline. I think it's going to have a detrimental impact on the European energy security, and it would further reinforce Russia's influence on that region. So as Secretary of State, I ask, could you utilize all the tools at your disposal, including the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, to ensure that the Nord Stream 2 pipeline is never built? And how do you view energy security of our allies and partners in Europe as important to our own national security?
Senator, actually, while there is definitely risk here, I actually view this as an enormous opportunity for the United States and for others as well. If we can achieve a condition where Russia has less capacity to turn off natural gas pipelines or to create risk and threats to our allies and to our friends around the world, we will have reduced the risk to the United States of America and to those countries greatly. And so I look forward to being part of the discussion about Nord Stream 2 in particular, to make sure that there are alternatives there that are in the West's best interest and not in Vladimir Putin's best interest.
And then turning to Iran, they continue to be a threat to the United States, to Israel, to the international community. Iran is the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism. They're financing terrorist groups around the world, and a lot of it has to do with the massive influx of cash that Iran received from the Iran nuclear deal. And they're continuing to support destabilizing activities in the region. There's incredible amounts of evidence of that. I think the United States has to impose sanctions on Iran for what they're doing with arms trafficking, with terrorism, the development of ballistic missiles. So could you visit a little bit about how you plan to respond to Iran's illicit activities, including what they're doing to support terrorism and arms trafficking and the missile developments?
Senator, the President has laid out a strategy to push back against each of those elements of threat to America that you've described. Maybe focus just on sanctions for a moment. There's still more arrows in the quiver. There's more work to do there. As CIA Director, we've been part of providing the intelligence so that we can target those sanctions in the right way. We understand who it is and who's moving weapons around the world and who's engaged in the malign activity which we're trying to stop. Ultimately, those designations are placed by Treasury and State, but the intelligence community's had a big role. I've been part of it. We got a big team working on it. We will continue to, and if I'm confirmed, I will be part of that. I will tell you that the other element of that is also a diplomatic task. It's important when America places sanctions. It is really powerful when we get our partners to do it as well, when we can share the burden that comes with placing sanctions, because Americans can't trade in those places. And when we can share that burden and truly create global prohibitions on trading with the entities we designate, we have the most likelihood of the greatest likelihood of achieving the outcome we're looking for.
And could I turn briefly to North Korea and the nuclear program there? Last month, President Trump agreed to meet with the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un. The United States, I believe, should be engaged in talks if they're not just for the purpose of talking. So I think we'd only be engaged in credible opportunities to discuss the denuclearization of North Korea. So it's also important that the U.S. continue to pressure this regime, imposing sanctions, conducting joint military exercises, keeping the regime fully aware of the consequences of their actions. So could you talk about if you believe there's a scenario in which North Korea would actually dismantle its nuclear weapons program, and how maximum pressure might work there?
Senator, the historic analysis there is not optimistic. That is, it is almost a talisman that there is not enough coercion, there is not enough capacity for Kim Jong-un to make the decision to give up his nuclear weapons arsenal. I hope that talisman is wrong, and that's the effort that we have been engaged in. Your point about the sanctions, I think, is relevant. I've had a chance to talk to a whole handful of the people who were involved in the agreed framework, the Leap Day deal, the six-party talks. In each case, America and the world released their sanctions too quickly. That is, we didn't have the verifiable, irreversible deal that we hoped that we had, and in each case, the North Koreans walked away from that deal. It is the intention of the president and the administration to not do that this time, to make sure that before it's the case, as we did with the JCPOA, before we provide rewards, we get the outcome permanently, irreversibly, that it is that we hope to achieve. It is a tall order, but I am hopeful that President Trump can achieve that through sound diplomacy, both personally and through the offices of the United States State Department.
And then the final question with regard to human rights, the rule of law. I appreciate your opening statement and the comments about your commitment to human rights around the world, and because if we don't, who will? Secretary of State, again, your commitment to promoting and protecting these important principles across the globe, I think, are key. So I appreciate your comments.
Thank you, Senator Barrasso.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Senator Markley.
Thank you very much. Earlier it was noted that an oath of office involves, and as you noted, you've taken it several times, to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Recently, President Trump has talked about a domestic enemy, saying that the execution of a search warrant by the U.S. law enforcement authorities on Michael Cohen's office constitutes an attack, and I quote, attack on our country in a true sense. Do you agree with the President's evaluation that that is an attack on our country?
Senator, I have always believed that the rule of law matters. I continue to believe that. Multiple times, individuals have asked me to comment on statements that others have made. Friends of mine have made, adversaries of mine have made, those who are coming after me. Today, what I want to talk about is the things that I believe. I believe deeply in the rule of law and will continue to do so.
And do you think the rule of law does enable appropriate warrants to be executed in parallel fashion to this?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Turning to North Korea, John Bolton said it's perfectly legitimate for the U.S. to respond to the current necessity posed by North Korea's nuclear weapons by striking first. Secretary of Defense Mattis had a different view, saying that war with North Korea would be catastrophic. Do you lean more towards John Bolton's view or Secretary of Defense Mattis's view?
That I lean more closely to the president's view, which is to continue the pressure campaign, to build a coalition, a diplomatic coalition around the world, to put pressure on Kim Jong-un such that we can achieve the United States goals without ever having to put one of our young men or women in harm's way.
Does the president have the constitutional authority to conduct a first strike on North Korea without authorization from Congress?
Senator, again, I'm not going to comment on hypothetical situations or complex legal matters.
Well, you've done so before, back a while, when the question was in regard to committing resources in Libya. You put out a statement regarding a letter to Barack Obama informing him that the administration would be in violation of the War Powers Resolution unless either authorization from Congress is obtained or the military withdraws operations from Libya by Sunday, June 19th. And then you commented and you said specifically that country, Libya does not pose a threat to the United States, nor do we have vital interests there. Did you believe, as you said then, that there is a constitutional limitation on the ability of the president to conduct war without an authorization from Congress?
Yes.
Thank you. In that context, not so long ago, there was a lot of discussion that in regard to Syria, if President Obama put troops on the ground in Syria without congressional authorization, it would constitute a foundation for impeachment. We had members of the Senate, including members of our Armed Services Committee, members of the House, And I just quote one of them, Representative Walter Jones said, "No president, Democratic, Republican, should have the authority to bypass the Constitution or the will of the American people." And he said, "If one of our troops goes to Syria and is killed, I will introduce articles of impeachment." So at the time of that discussion, did you share the view that for President Obama to put troops on the ground in Syria would be a violation of the Constitution?
Senator, I don't recall if I did or if I made a statement with respect to that at that time. I simply don't recall.
But just to clarify, in the case of Libya, you did see that there was a line being crossed.
Oh, yes, yes, Senator, I believed that.
The argument at that point was that under our NATO mutual defense and a NATO action, but you still felt that didn't give the foundation for action in Libya.
Yes, Senator, I believed what I think you said, described it as a letter, not a statement. I believed what I said in that statement.
It is an issue of great concern here on the boundaries, and certainly I think some of your earlier caution about presidents exceeding their constitutional authority is caution that we'd like to hear in your role as Secretary of State. It's often a case when people make the journey down Pennsylvania Avenue, the war powers in the Constitution granted to Congress seem to be forgotten. Will you not forget those constitutional delineation of responsibilities?
Senator, I promise you that I will take equal consideration in the same way I did that day in 2011, as I have done as a CIA director, and as if I'm confirmed as Secretary of State, I will continue to do that.
John Bolton noted that it was legitimate for the U.S. to respond to the current necessity posed by North Korea's nuclear program by striking first. Do you agree with that?
Senator, I'm sorry, might you repeat it?
John Bolton argued that it's legitimate for the U.S. to respond to North Korea's nuclear weapons program by striking first. Do you agree with that?
Again, I don't want to wade into a hypothetical about under what conditions it might be appropriate or not appropriate. We're a long ways from that. We're working diplomatically to get the right outcome in North Korea.
John Bolton argued that Cuba was developing biological weapons and it was appropriate for the United States to go to war against Cuba. Did you agree with him on that?
Senator, I'm not going to. His words speak for himself.
No, it speaks for him, but
tell me what the question is.
But he's not here. You're here.
Tell me. I understand
your opinion.
I'm deeply aware of that. I'm sorry, Senator. Might you ask? Is there a factual predicate there about Cuban and
Did you
weapons?
agree with Bolton's viewpoint that we should go to war with Cuba?
No, Senator.
How about?
I haven't at any time stated that I believe we should go to war with Cuba.
How about in regard to his belief that Hussein had hidden weapons of mass destruction and we should go to war with Iraq?
Senator, I think I may not have expounded sufficiently. I've read the history. The intelligence community had that assessment was incorrect about its assessment at that time.
I'll just note the reason I'm asking you these questions is there's a lot of concern in America, and a lot of people are paying attention to this hearing, and they're asking the fundamental question: are we assembling a war cabinet of John Bolton and Mike Pompeo that are going to result in devastating consequences, bypassing Congress's authority in regards to the use of military force, and perhaps engaging in another poorly thought through mistake like our war on Iraq that has resulted in a huge loss of American lives, a huge loss of American resources, enormous instability, including Iran developing an enormous track of influence from Iran through Iraq, through Syria to Lebanon and Yemen. And people want to know whether or not your views are close enough to Bolton's in his advocacy of force in virtually every situation that we are going to have a very dangerous arrangement on the key two advisors to the President of the United States. If the chair will indulge, could you just give me a sense of that?
I really won't. We're getting ready to start a second round.
Well, Mr. Chairman, many people have gone significantly over their time, and I'm still just within 1 minute.
Well, since you're begging, go ahead.
Thank you. Not begging, asserting fairness.
Senator, I'm sorry. Might I get you to reframe the question or ask the question one more time? I apologize.
Yes, many people in America.
But you heard the question. Just answer it. Are you forming a war cabinet?
Yeah, Senator, I've been part of this cabinet. I've watched it thoughtfully deliberate about all of these things, and I can tell you every day at the forefront of our mind is how can we find solutions that achieve the American objective, but avoid us having to put a single American in harm's way. You have my commitment that as a Secretary of State, or if I continue as a CIA director, that I will continue to hold that in the forefront of my mind.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Senator Portman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Pompeo, thank you for your willingness to step up and serve again. I imagine it's hard to leave the CIA after only 15 months, given your tenure there, which was successful and where you developed a lot of close relationships. But you're taking on a new task, and it's a different task. You know, CIA is primarily an organization that informs policymakers. Now you're going to be a policymaker. And I think you've got a good background to do so. I enjoyed our meeting. I've enjoyed getting to know you over the years. We talked about some tough issues, and we talked about soft power. And, you know, kind of to the suggestions that were made here today, that as a guy with your background, particularly your military background, do you really believe in diplomacy and soft power? And, you know, you got a pretty impressive background. You were on the House Intelligence Committee. You were #1 in your class at West Point. You also went to Harvard Law School. I won't hold that against you. And you were magna cum laude at Harvard Law School. But you did serve in the military. You served as a cavalry officer, patrolling, as I recall, the Iron Curtain at the time. And so I guess my question for you is, because there's been suggestions that you'd be too quick to turn to military options, how would you respond to that?
Senator, I said this, or at least I can't recall if I read it this morning, but it was certainly in my opening statement. There are few people like soldiers who appreciate diplomats and good diplomatic work. You train, you prepare. You want very much to be prepared if America calls upon you, but you are counting on the fact that there will be diplomats around the world resolving these challenges, pushing back on these conflicts, preventing the very activity for which it is you're training and preparing. And so, as a Secretary of State, you have my commitment.
You know who you
I will
sound like?
endeavor to do that.
You sound like Colin Powell. And
I'll take that as high praise.
Yeah. Well, look, for those who wonder, can you be a military officer and also be a good diplomat? I think he is someone who proves the point. Highly regarded at the State Department, combat officer like yourself, someone who had a strong military background, and he was very effective at the diplomacy part and of managing the Foreign Service as well. And something you and I talked about a lot in our meeting was your management approach. And I told you I thought that our morale problem at the State Department was real and that we needed a fresh start there. I enjoyed working with Secretary Tillerson. I think his lack of appointees being confirmed by this body was one of the problems, but for whatever the reasons, there's a morale problem. And I'm not going to ask you to repeat what you said to me in private, but I was encouraged because you talked about, you didn't talk about that drill sergeant, so you have to listen. I heard that today because I've been listening as well today. And but you did in our meeting talk about the respect you have for the Foreign Service and your belief that you can not just improve that morale, but get people motivated, feeling like they're important and make a difference. There's a lot of talk about Libya today and your views then. And there's talk about Syria today and what's going on in terms of the decision making. Let me broaden this a little bit and ask about something that our committee is struggling with right now, which is this notion that we have an AUMF, the authorization for the use of military force, that dates back to 2001 and 2002, and has not been updated. How do you feel about that? Do you think we should update the AUMF?
I do, Senator. And if I may elaborate, I actually was part of a team on the House side some years ago that worked on that, worked with that on the White House. We weren't ultimately able to be successful. I do believe that it is important that we achieve that we have a new set of leaders in the United States Congress who also provide that authorization. I think the one that we have works. I think it provides the authorities that the President needs today, but I would welcome working alongside you to achieve, I think you used the term refreshed AUMF.
Well, I think it's very important. You know, honestly, I think it's not inappropriate to say that some in the administration have not been as forthcoming to try to get to a decision here because a number of us believe that it ought to be flexible as to region, as to groups. We do believe the President has inherent authorities within the Constitution and as Commander-in-Chief that need to be respected, but that it's just not tenable to say we're relying on an AUMF that goes back to 2001. That was, 17 years ago. So we would like to work with you on that. In our meeting, we talked about how Russia and other countries, China included, have pursued extensive disinformation and propaganda campaigns. And I think we're kind of missing out on that, both on the diplomatic front with the State Department and on the military front. People call the new hybrid threat. It's kinetic, it's military, but it's also disinformation. And other countries have figured that out, and most of them, like Iran and Russia and China and others, are using North Korea, using disinformation in a very sophisticated way. It wasn't just about our election, which I believe the Russians did meddle in our election, and I think it's well beyond that. And by the way, it happened before, and it's going to happen after unless we do something about it. These operations use a range of tools, cyber attacks, hacking, troll farms, go on social media. They fund useful think tanks, political organizations. Senator Murphy and I have done a lot of work on this, and we have legislation, as you know, to set up this global engagement center to really give it the personnel and the funding it needs to be able to push back. I'd like to know your views on that, and specifically, do you agree with me on the severity of the threat that's posed by foreign government propaganda, disinformation to U.S. interests and to our allies?
Yes, I do. Senator, I think it's a real threat, one that has been underappreciated for years now. It has become cheaper, faster, less attributable, so its power has increased, the capacity for malign actors to use these information tools in ways that they just didn't have available to them 20 or 40 years ago. It also makes stopping it more difficult and require a more comprehensive effort. We've had a small role at the Central Intelligence Agency at pushing back against it. And I know that there's been lots of talk about the Global Engagement Center. In the event that I'm confirmed, I promise you I will put excellent foreign service officers, excellent civil service officers on the task of developing out that capability and using it in a robust way.
Well, I'm encouraged to hear that, and as you know, we've made some progress recently getting some funds there, starting it up. Will you commit to helping implement this in an aggressive way, including ensuring we have the right staff there to be able to pursue this critical mission?
I will, Senator Porter.
I just got back from Ukraine, and I see I just have a minute and a half left based on what everybody else took, so I'll take it. I just got back from Ukraine, and as you and I talked about, Ukraine, unfortunately, is ground zero for what's going on with regard to disinformation, but it's beyond that. I was out at the contact line and saw the military activities as well. Do you support the continuation of providing defensive lethal weapons to the Ukrainians so they can defend themselves?
Senator, I do.
Do you pledge that the United States, while you're Secretary of State, would never recognize the annexation of Crimea?
Yes, Senator, I will fight to make sure that that does not happen. And obviously, it would be the president's decision. But yes, I think it would be completely inappropriate to do that.
And do you believe sanctions on Russia imposed because of its aggression in Ukraine should remain until Russia implements the terms of the Minsk ceasefire agreement, halts its aggression?
I do, Senator.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Director.
Thank you, Senator Portman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence.
Thank you. We're beginning the second round now. There'll be 5 minutes, and I haven't heard from Mary Alice. Are you ready?
Might we take just 5 minutes, Senator?
Yes, sir. We'll take a 5-minute recess and convene again at 1:40. Thank you.
All right, guys, so Mike Pompeo on his way to becoming Secretary of State, facing this line of questioning here, the Senate confirmation, and looks like they're on a short break now, so we're going to bring it back into the newsroom for a second. But thanks so much for hanging out with us on the stream, for watching our live stream today. A lot of political stuff on the Hill, like I mentioned. Concurrently, we have Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis's questioning here by the House Armed Services Committee. That's going on right now. You can see that on your screen. We have live video of that. And then coming up shortly in the next 10 minutes or so, we're told there's going to be a press conference in the Rose Garden at the White House with President Trump. He'll be speaking about taxes, which is interesting. This just came up and I hadn't actually seen it on our live list, but that is coming up very shortly. So we'll have that for you as well. Again, a lot of political stuff today, like we said, but You never know, it's a variety of things that we cover here. Anything live and breaking is our priority. So I want to go over, though, to some more stories that we've been working on throughout our Fox stations across the nation. Just some big things that are happening, including a story about sending more troops to the U.S.-Mexico border. And then, of course, a summation of what's going on in Syria right now as the administration decides what to do next after the suspected chemical attack in Syria. And some more stories for you as well. So here's some of our top stories, and then we'll take it back in and go right over to the White House for President Trump live.
How about the Border Patrol and securing the border?
More National Guard troops heading to the border with Mexico. About 400 California National Guard troops will help secure the Golden State's border. California Governor Jerry Brown agreed Wednesday to accept federal funding, but only to help fight against drug traffickers, smuggling, and other gun-related crimes, not to back the Trump administration's agenda on immigration and borders. Arizona also will be sending more support to the southern border, and following in California's footsteps, they too will not support the government's border mission.
As we work through getting the first 60 to Nogales by Friday, and we hope to have the balance of those 226 that are ground-based element down to Customs and Border Patrol for assignment by Saturday.
Meanwhile, Attorney General Jeff Sessions is ordering prosecutors to stop illegal immigrants.
Our goal ultimately is not arrest, see how many we can arrest, but our goal is to deter people from attempting to come illegally.
Some border residents say they welcome the added protection.
They eventually will find a way to get over it. But in a way it's good because, like I say, it keeps all the riffraff on that side.
In March, there was a 37% increase in illegal border crossings, which resulted in more than 50,000 immigrants coming into the U.S. That's triple the number of reported illegal border crossings in the same period last year. In New York, Jackie Ibanez, Fox News.
Let's call this what it is, a political witch hunt.
Missouri lawmakers are calling on Republican Governor Eric Greitens to resign immediately after a special House committee released a report Wednesday vividly detailing the governor's extramarital affair with his hairdresser in 2015. In the report, the woman only known as KS is accusing Greitens of initiating unwanted sexual contact, including spanking, slapping, and grabbing her. Then, without the woman's permission, taking a partially nude picture of her, and allegedly threatening to distribute it to the public if she spoke to anyone about the affair. Greitens says the investigation has no merit.
I want to say again what I've said from the beginning. This is a political witch hunt.
However, the committee, made up of 5 Republicans and 2 Democrats, disagrees.
Let me be very clear about this. This is not a witch hunt, and the committee had no political agenda.
Following the release of the report, some Democratic leaders are pushing for Greitens' resignation.
It is clear to me that this governor must resign, and if he fails to do so, I believe we should begin impeachment proceedings.
The committee says an invitation to Greitens to testify and give his side of the story remains open. They could decide as early as May whether they will pursue impeachment. In Washington, Caroline Shively, Fox News.
A military strike against Syria is on a hot boil at the White House, but the press secretary, Sarah Sanders, saying today it may not be inevitable.
That's certainly one option, but that doesn't mean it's the only option.
In a tweet this morning, President Trump suggested a missile strike was imminent, taunting Russia, which has threatened to shoot down American missiles over Syria. The president tweeting, Russia vows to shoot down any and all missiles fired at Syria. Get ready, Russia, because they will be coming. Nice and new and smart. You shouldn't be partners with a gas-killing animal who kills his people and enjoys it. The tweet brought howls of hypocrisy from some corners. Isn't this the same president who trashed President Obama for telegraphing his military intentions?
He certainly hasn't laid out the timetable, which would be broadcasting his intentions.
Other critics took aim at the president for not having a cohesive strategy on Syria, announcing one week that he wants American troops out, now threatening a military strike.
I think the president does not have a serious strategy. And I think one-off attacks or tweets or missile strikes are not the same as a strategy.
The president's national security team, including Defense Secretary James Mattis, huddled with the vice president at the White House today to go over options. Mattis saying earlier today that the U.S. is still awaiting confirmation that chemical weapons were in fact used in Duma.
We're still assessing the intelligence ourselves and our allies. We're still working on this.
Is the U.S. military ready right now to conduct a retaliatory strike if ordered?
We stand ready to provide military options if they're appropriate, as the president determined.
Russia continues to deny that chemical weapons were used. A senior military official today saying the attack was staged by rebel emergency responders, the White Helmets.
Based on investigating the territory, visiting the medical institutions featured in the footage by the White Helmets, questioning of medical personnel and patients, we found no evidence of poisoning substances or victims among residents of this town.
In a series of tweets, President Trump today said, "Our relationship with Russia is worse now than it has ever been, and that includes the Cold War." And he blamed the deterioration on the Mueller investigation, tweeting, "Much of the bad blood with Russia is caused by the fake and corrupt Russia investigation." The president is still piqued about the raid on his personal attorney, Michael Cohen. Part of what the FBI was looking for was documents related to the infamous Access Hollywood tape. It appears to be an attempt to link the tape to the Stormy Daniels payment. Was Cohen trying to avoid more bad publicity to protect the campaign? Did the payment constitute an illegal political contribution? President Trump incensed that the Mueller investigation may have strayed well outside the bounds of its initial mandate.
The president certainly has been clear that he has a very deep concern about the direction that the special counsel and other investigations have taken.
Is President Trump again considering firing Mueller? He has gone from flat denials to a far more ambiguous posture. Certainly, the president's allies are warning against it.
Well, look, I think it would be a mistake, a grave mistake by the president to fire Robert Mueller. I have no belief that he will.
The Cohen raid may be an attempt to put pressure on Cohen to cooperate with prosecutors, threaten him with campaign finance-related crimes in hopes that he would roll over on the president. Cohen has a treasure trove of knowledge about President Trump. Flipping the president's personal attorney would certainly mark a dramatic escalation in the momentum of this investigation. At the White House, John Roberts, Fox News.
When there's kids involved, man, that's serious stuff.
This stretch of freeway minutes before leaving San Ysidro into Mexico is where U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers rescued 2 young children from being kidnapped.
Our officers raced out there, started to slow the traffic down, and within 5 to 10 minutes, we'd identified the vehicle and got the driver out of the vehicle and rescued the kids from the driver.
That's how it ended, but it started around 12:30 Monday afternoon in Lincoln Park. A father left his 3-year-old son and 8-year-old daughter in his running car to get something from this beauty supply store. When he came back, the car, a gold Hyundai Elantra, and his kids were gone. The older child in the car had a cell phone and called 911. Police then alerted Border Patrol.
They just run right out there in the middle of the traffic, which makes it dangerous for them. There's no infrastructure out in that area. It's kind of wide open.
Searching the fast-moving traffic, within 5 to 10 minutes, officers had identified the vehicle.
And the officers saw the vehicle, and they saw the 2 kids in the back kind of motioning. I guess they said that one kid had their hands like this and was mouthing, "Help me."
This story has a happy ending, but agents were prepared for the worst, alerting law enforcement in Mexico in the event they missed the car.
Because once next to the port, if we don't interdict that vehicle, 2 minutes and they're pretty much into Mexico.
It's the time of day many kids dream of, recess. And in Arizona, they're about to get more of it. A new law requires all charter and public elementary schools in the state to have 2 recess periods throughout the school day. It makes Arizona just one of 2 states in the U.S. that requires more than 1 set time period of physical activity, according to Shape America, and only 8 states require elementary schools to provide daily recess at all.
After all, adults get breaks at work, right? And it's because they've learned that people need a break to get up, move around, and to be able to come back, and they do better. And so same with children.
And research backs this. According to a Shape of the Nation report, recess has been associated with better student classroom behavior. Children who are more active demonstrate higher scholastic achievement and greater ability to focus.
There is some evidence that shows that increasing the number of minutes spent in moderate to vigorous physical activity through recess and through physical education does not impede academic performance. In some cases, it'll help students do better.
This is a no-brainer. Kids need a break.
The Arizona Senate passed this bill with a final vote of 27-3, but parents and school officials have more mixed reviews on more recess.
We feel our local districts are the ones in the best position to decide how to use the instructional day to best maximize student success.
I actually think that more recess would probably be more beneficial, so this way I'm not stressed out in school.
While the idea of more recess isn't an issue for many parents, some struggle with adding another mandate.
I think they need to have a break in their day to help their brains restart. I don't know that adding an additional requirement on top of all the other requirements we have to meet is really going to be the most beneficial.
The recess law will apply to kindergarten through third graders this year and fourth and fifth graders starting in 2019. In Phoenix, Charlie LaPastora, Fox News.
Some interesting stories there on your Thursday, April 12th. Those are all from around the nation. Some of the top stories that we've been tracking and watching throughout the day. Meanwhile, guys, we do have the shot now of the Rose Garden at the White House as the 2017 tax season comes to a close. President Trump is now making some remarks on his new tax law and everything going into place next year. And he's in the Rose Garden in just a few minutes to be making a statement on that. And we have the shot up for you now. So we're gonna bring you over there. But meanwhile, quickly, this morning, this Thursday, the head of the IRS said that the tax season has actually gone well. The 2017 enrollment and the in general, the tax filing has gone well, but he said that implementing the new tax law will definitely take extensive work. That's in his words this morning. So we'll see what Trump has to say about that coming up in just a few moments. We're going to bring you over there to the Rose Garden.
And I said, I put it.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. You must have been looking at today's stock market. Pretty good numbers. Thank you all very much. It is wonderful to be here in the beautiful Rose Garden, special place, special building right behind us, the White House. And we're going to discuss our massive tax cuts that are growing paychecks all over our country. They're creating jobs and expanding the American dream, just like we said would happen. That's the way it's happened. I want to thank all of the members of Congress here today who helped us pass these incredible tax cuts and reform into law. You know, for years they haven't been able to do it. They were unable to do it, not since Ronald Reagan, and we topped that one. But they called it tax reform. We discussed that, right? We discussed it. I said we have to call it not tax reform. Nobody knows what that means. That could mean a tax increase. We have to call it tax cuts. So we call it tax cuts and jobs. And guess what? We got it passed. I also want to recognize a great friend of mine and a man who's doing a fantastic job, Vice President Pence. Mike, stand up. Thank you. And members of my cabinet, they are working tirelessly. We have Secretary Mnuchin, Secretary Acosta, Administrator McMahon. Thank you. Please stand up. And all of the members of Congress and senators, thank you, and congressmen and women, thank you very much. Most especially, I want to thank all of the American workers in the audience. We have a lot of them who have traveled here from all over the country. They wanted to be with us. This event is dedicated to you, the hardworking Americans who make our nation run. You love your country. You provide for your family. You're proud of everything you've done. You've got that great extra strength that other people don't have. And you cherish a wonderful thing called our great American flag. And now, because of our tax cuts, you can keep more of your hard-earned money. Larry Kudlow is very happy about that, sitting in the front row. Right, Larry? Good. He says yes. Married couples won't pay a dime of income tax on their first $24,000 of income. A typical family of four earning $75,000 a year will see their tax bill slashed in half. Nobody thought they'd ever see that. Have a lot more money to spend. And we didn't get one Democratic vote. That's tough. In fact, I have to say, they want to increase your taxes. If they ever got into power, they have stated that they want to increase your taxes and spend money on things that you don't even want to know about. So we've doubled, very importantly, the child tax credit. They want so many other things, and people have wanted other things, and frankly, we fought very hard. We've taken care of our military for the first time in many, many years. $700 billion. We're going to have the strongest military that we've ever had. And can you think of a better time to have it, right? This is when we need it. We're going to have it. $700 billion, and next year, $716 billion. Also in that bill, $6 billion for opioid and helping us out with that horrible, horrible problem. The fact is, we don't care about the donors and the special interests. We only care about you and your family and really making America great again. That's what we care about. That's why we're here. From the day I took the oath of office, I've been fighting to drain the swamp. And sometimes it may not look like it, but believe me, we are draining the swamp. And there are a lot of unhappy people. You can see that every day. All you have to do is turn on the news. Every time you see me hit, you know that I'm draining the swamp. And people don't like it. But we're also defending the American worker. We're making incredible trade deals. We're taking NAFTA, one of the worst deals ever made in the history of trade, and we are redoing it, and it will be a fair deal for the Americans. We lost thousands of factories and millions of jobs because of NAFTA. Thousands, think of it, thousands of factories, millions of jobs. We're turning it around. Already Chrysler's coming back with auto plants. Many companies are now in Michigan, Ohio, different places, Pennsylvania. They're building beautiful, brand new auto plants. Nobody thought they'd ever see that happen. We've created 3 million new jobs since the election. Unemployment claims are at their lowest level in nearly 50 years. Think of that, 50 years. Something I'm very proud about, unemployment rates for Hispanics and African Americans have reached the lowest levels ever recorded. Ever recorded. Think of that. Very proud of it. Remember, I used to say at rallies, what do you have to lose? Guess what? What do you have to lose? You have the lowest levels ever recorded for African Americans, Hispanics. I'm very, very happy about that. And by the way, for women, the lowest levels in 19 years. So we have really good numbers. And something a lot of people didn't think was going to happen, wages are rising at the fastest pace in over a decade. We're cutting record numbers of regulations. We've cut more regulations in a year and a quarter than any administration, whether it's 4 years, 8 years, or in one case, 16 years. Should we go back to 16 years? Should we do that? Congressman, can we have that extended? You know, the last time I jokingly said that, the papers started saying, he's got despotic tendencies. No, I'm not looking to do it. Unless you want to do it, that's okay. We're also unleashing American energy and American energy independence. We're now an exporter of energy. We're doing 10 million barrels a day. Nobody thought they'd see this. 10 million. In fact, it's going to now be 10.6 million. We're cracking down on unfair trade deals. We're taking strong action to secure our border, stop illegal immigration, and restore the rule of law. And we've passed the biggest tax cut and reform in American history. More than 5 million workers have already received a tax cut bonus, a pay raise, or a new job thanks to these really massive tax cuts. Millions more. Millions more are getting higher take-home pay. No one has been more energized by our tax cuts than American manufacturers. With us today is the president of the National Association of Manufacturers, Jay Timmons. Where's Jay? Jay, stand up, Jay. Thank you, Jay. For 20 years, their organization has surveyed American manufacturers. All over the country they survey, and it's a great organization. And they have never before seen the levels of optimism that our tax cuts have delivered. Is that a correct statement, Jay? It's dangerous to ask you that, because if you say no, I have a problem. Thank you, Jay. It's true, so true. In fact, today there is even more good news, and I wanted all of you to be the first to hear it. According to the latest survey by the National Association of Manufacturers, projected job growth for American manufacturing has just reached a new all-time high. So you think about that, the oil at 10 million barrels, and you think about the manufacturing. All you used to hear is that we're losing our manufacturing jobs. Jobs are being taken out of the country. They're coming back, and they're coming back fast. Projections for capital investment and wage growth have also set new all-time records, and we're just getting started. There is enthusiasm like we've never seen before. Companies from all over the world are coming back to the United States. Apple is investing $350 billion, with a B, $350 billion in an incredible campus and plants. So many other companies, far too many to name. And what they're really doing is giving their workers thousands and thousands of dollars of bonuses, something that we never really expected. Nobody thought of it. We did the tax cuts. We thought you'd have to wait till February. But you started seeing them very early because hundreds and even actually thousands of companies were giving massive numbers of whatever you want to call it. What would you call it, Mike? The thousands of dollars. What would you call that? We can't say it's a gift because they're workers. We can't say it's a tax because it's not a tax. But they were getting a lot of money, and so many, and a lot of companies didn't want to do it. And the people working for the company said, what about us? And they did it. They had no choice. In fact, another great announcement to share with you as well. Today I will sign a presidential memorandum directing the EPA to cut even more red tape on our manufacturers. So that they can expand and continue to hire and to grow. And I will say, this is about tax cuts today, but the cutting of regulations could have had the same or even a bigger impact on our economy. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. People were stuck. They'd have a factory, it would be under review for 10 years, 12 years, and then get rejected. You've seen what we've done with the pipelines and so many businesses all over our country that are being approved rapidly. We're getting highway approvals down from 20, 17, 15, 12, 10 years. We're getting them down to 1 year and 2 years. We're going to get the highways approved quickly. We're going to get our roads, our bridges, our tunnels, our schools. No more waiting 18 to 20 years to get an approval, and then, by the way, they don't get the approval. And you may not get the approval, but it's going to be quick. It'll be a quick rejection. But you'll get them for the most part. And we will take care of our environment. Remember that. We'll take just as good, if not better, care of our environment. And we'll have better roads and better bridges and better schools. We're bringing back our factories. We're bringing back our jobs, and we're bringing back those four really beautiful words that you don't hear very much. We used to hear that 30 years ago. I won't say any more than that because I don't want to date myself. 40 years ago, 50 years ago. It was called Made in the USA. Do you remember? Made in the USA. We're bringing it back. We used to hear that all the time. Now you're starting to hear it again. We know that. Today we have workers here from almost 50 American companies. I'd like to invite a few of you up here, and you're already up for the most part, to share the American people and with all of the folks that are here, how the tax cuts have improved your lives. And we've had some incredible stories, actually. Joining us today are Derek Leathers and Quinton Ward with Werner Trucking in Omaha, Nebraska. Great place, great state. Where are you? Derek. Oh, he's a big guy. Come here, Derek. How about saying a few words, please?
Thank you, Mr. President. Tax reform has already produced real benefits at Werner. Trucking is the engine that keeps America moving. And with the tax cuts, we've been able to increase our capital investment this year by $127 million, 90% of which is dedicated to trucks and trailers that are cleaner, safer, and better for the American roadways. We've also increased and announced increases of $24 million for our 9,500 driver associates. That works out to over $2,400 per professional driver. I want to recognize Marvin and Kathy with me today. Marvin is a 22-year Operation Freedom driver at Werner, 15 years in the U.S. Army, and 2 million accident-free miles delivered on America's roadways. Marvin told me that he and his wife are going to take an RV trip to Orlando to an important family reunion with some of the money that they've earned from the tax cuts. Kathy is a single mother of 2. She works in our driver analytics group and is proudly raising 2 beautiful children, and with her earnings, she's going to continue to support them on their quest for a college education. Mr. President, I just want to thank you for your hard work to invest, to free up the American economy, our businesses, and the men and women that make it happen. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to invite Quentin Ward, a driver of Operation Freedom for Werner Enterprises.
It's such an honor to be here today. This president understands that government doesn't create jobs, businesses and people do. The tax reform law puts money back in my pocket. It has a direct impact on me. You know, after leaving the military, I was looking for a good paying career, and the trucking industry aggressively hires veterans, and especially Werner. And when I had the opportunity to work for the Operation Freedom Fleet, which emphasizes the hiring of military veterans, I was beside myself. I mean, it was a dream come true. Mr. President, you care about truck drivers, and we see that. You know, we cover this country and haul freight that keeps America moving every day. Thank you so much for fighting for us. This tax law means a better future for me and a significant pay increase this year, which will allow me to take my family on a trip that we've been planning for years but never quite made it. So on behalf of Werner and myself, I'd like to thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
That's beautiful. And, you know, very importantly, the roads are getting a lot better. Do you notice? Those roads are getting better. The truckers were not too happy with the roads. They're getting a lot better. Also with us is Brittany Saxton, the owner of 600 Downtown, a pizzeria in Bellefontaine, Ohio. I hear it's great pizza, too. I heard from a friend of mine. They say it's great. Where's the pizza? Where's Brittany? Brittany, how good is the pizza? I've heard great things. Have to bring her with you next time, right? So, Brittany, tell us about what the tax cuts have done for your business and what they've done for your family and you, please. Thank you very much. Thank you.
President Trump, my name is Brittany Saxton. I want to thank you for your leadership on tax cuts. I started my very first job doing dishes in my hometown pizzeria, where I have worked hard and earned opportunities to work up to food prep, waiting tables, and a manager and lead as my team. Today, I'm the proud owner of that pizzeria and very thankful for my tax cuts. With the reductions, I've been able to open my second restaurant, provide insurance and health benefits for my key managers in my company, and I've really seen a huge increase in our downtown Main Street economy boost. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Now I'd like to hear from Richard and John. They're Universal Plumbing in Las Vegas. And I don't know, did you do any work in any of my buildings out in Las Vegas? Where are they? Where are they?
Not yet.
Anytime I'll take you. Richard, John, say something, please.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. President, thank you for inviting us here today. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you and other workers what your tax plan has meant to Universal Plumbing and Heating Company and our industry. After purchasing much needed trucks, tools, and office equipment, which were long overdue, we're excited to share a tax cut of benefits with our 30 employees. In addition to seeing increases in their weekly paychecks, we gave bonuses of $500 and $1,000 to all our employees. We also increased our workforce by hiring several new employees. Mr. President, thank you for making this possible, and we appreciate all you do. And now I am proud to introduce John, a father of two, and an apprentice, and also he is a 21-year-old plumbing apprentice. John?
Thank you, President Trump, for everything you've done for our country and my family. I'm a plumber. Me and my wife just recently had a son, Wrigley, born in January. He spent a week in the NICU. As the doctor bills started to come in, me and my wife are worrying on how we are going to pay for these doctor bills. And then our company, Universal Plumbing, came to us and gave all the employees $1,000 tax cuts. And with those, we were able to pay our doctor's bills. And I would just like to thank Mr. President for everything he's doing for our country, the workforce, and the apprentices, as I am a second-year plumbing apprentice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's beautiful. Finally, please welcome Nicole Bergstrom and Brandon McMillan with Smithcraft Signs in Phoenix, Arizona. They have a great story to tell. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Wow. I'm Nicole, and I run Smithcraft Signs. We are a veteran-owned small manufacturing company. We're a job shop, and what tax reform means for me is what we can do for our team. To improve our capabilities for buying new equipment, we issued a special bonus to our mid-level employees. Deanne in our accounting department told me that she's using the extra money for what she describes as a dream bucket list vacation to visit her daughter, who was recently discharged from the Navy, who's now in Hawaii. Phil in NOAS is using the money for a bathroom remodel he's been planning for over 10 years. I'm very excited about what the future holds for us. And again, so many thanks.
Thank you very much. It's so beautiful. Thank you very much. Thank you. Please.
Good afternoon. What a tremendous honor to be here today. My name is Brandon, and I'm a sales manager for Smithcraft Signs. My family is personally benefiting from tax cut. Due to a recent bonus I received, my wife, Andrea, who is a public school educator, is now able to stay home this summer with our two kids instead of getting a job. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Beautiful. Thank you. Well, thank you all for sharing your stories. They're great stories and great success, too. And I know we'll see you in the years to come, bigger and better and stronger than ever. I believe that, all of you. Great stories. Thank you. I'm very proud to announce that we're getting along very well with respect to the whole very big negotiation that we're having with China. For many years, our country has been very much taken advantage of. I don't blame China. I blame our representatives, frankly. Too bad we couldn't have done it the other way around, but it didn't work that way. So China is negotiating with us very hard, very long, and we've made a lot of progress for opening it up and for getting rid of those tariffs. And I think you're going to see some tremendous business openings. President Xi, who's a friend of mine and a man I like very much, I think he actually likes me very much also, believe it or not. But he's for China, I'm for us. It's the way it works. But he announced yesterday that he'll be opening it up, a lot of barriers coming down, tremendous market, and let's see if we're going to do it in a very friendly way. I think we will. I think it'll end up the tariffs off and the barriers down. You know, as an example,
if they sell a car into the United States under the old system, but it's currently going, but I think we'll make a lot of progress. They sell it, they pay almost no tax, 2.5%. We sell a car into China. Number one, they have a barrier. They don't want them. They want you to build the plant there. That's bad. But if you do get it through, it's 25%. So we get 2.5%, they get 25%. Somehow that formula doesn't work too well. Larry taught me that a long time ago. So we are changing it around, and it's going to be great for China. It's going to be great for us. I think it's going to work out really well. NAFTA, the same thing. We're negotiating with Canada, with Mexico, and we've made a lot of progress. We'll see how it all works out. The European Union, same thing. They have tremendous barriers. We can't do business. It's very hard to do business. We lost $151 billion in trade deficits last year. European Union. Sounds innocent, but it's been not good for us. So we're renegotiating that whole deal. All of this is going to mean a lot of business, a lot of tremendous business for our country. So America's greatest treasure by far is our people. And my administration hears your voice, and we have your back. We have your back. We're fighting to give every American, all over the country, every single American, a future of dignity and purpose and of pride. Because the jobs that just weren't doing it, they weren't there. They were being stolen. They were leaving our country. Companies were leaving, and they were firing. Now they're coming back, and they're hiring. And that's the way we want it. We're going to have tremendous growth in this country. You're going to be so proud of it. We were proud of our country anyway, but now you're going to really be proud of it because that American spirit is back. It really is back. It's the same spirit that linked our nation with railroads and highways, that dug out the great Panama Canal, and that put a man on the face of the moon. America was built by men and women like you who never give in, never give up, and never, ever stop believing in that great American dream. We are the ones who are shaping our own destiny. And you are the ones who are restoring our prosperity. You are the ones who are truly bringing and making America first again. And you are the ones that are taking us to levels that we have never seen before. That's what's happening right now. You're bringing our country to levels that we have never, ever seen before. So I want to thank everybody for being with us today, and God bless you all. God bless America. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, fellas.
All right, guys, so that's President Trump in the Rose Garden with his remarks on tax cuts and tax reform and American workers. He had some American workers from around the nation speak to their experience with this. And yeah, that will kind of conclude our digital stream here today on YouTube. So we want to thank you so much for joining us here on Fox 5 Live. We're here during the weekdays, 11:30. Into the afternoon, as long as we have some live coverage. Of course, we were covering the Senate confirmation of Mike Pompeo, former CIA director, now nominated for Secretary of State. And that's still going on right now, but we're going to roll it out from here for YouTube and ask that you join us on our other digital platforms at Fox 5 DC on all platforms. For now, guys, I'm Molly. I'll see you guys tomorrow on the stream. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.